The morning felt heavier than usual, as if the house itself carried the weight of the man who was no longer there. The old wooden home, the one that had hosted countless Christmas dinners and summer cookouts, stood unnervingly quiet. Inside, the family gathered in dark clothes, their voices low, their movements stiff, like guests at a party no one wanted to attend. The father, the businessman who had built all of this, brick by brick, deal by deal, was gone. After years of illness, he had finally lost the fight, and now his family sat in the home he left behind, waiting for what came next. The mother sat in her husband's chair, the frame of his photograph pressed tightly to her chest. Her grey hair was pinned back neatly, but her hands shook as she tried to keep herself composed. She wasn't just mourning, she was bracing. She knew her children too well, knew that grief and greed often sat at the same table. From across the room, whispers slipped through the quiet. "The company has to go to me," the eldest son muttered, his tone sharp, certain. His sister, sipping from a delicate cup of coffee, replied under her breath, "We'll see about that." The cousin in the corner fiddled with her phone until her mother snatched it away. The youngest son tapped his knee nervously, his eyes locked on the doorway, as though waiting for something, or someone, to arrive. The mother closed her eyes, her lips trembling. She whispered to the photo in her lap, so softly no one else could hear. "Why did you leave me with this? They're already tearing each other apart." And then came the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow, hesitant. The front door creaked open, and a man stood in the doorway. He wasn't dressed for mourning. His jacket was worn, his shoes scuffed, his face lined with a kind of tiredness that didn't come from grief alone. He lingered there, not stepping inside, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on the mother. For a brief second she froze, her grip tightening on the photo as though she recognised something in him, something no one else noticed. "Who's that?" one of the children whispered. But before anyone could ask again, the man gave a small nod and stepped back into the cold, pulling the door shut behind him. The family exchanged puzzled looks, a mix of annoyance and suspicion. The eldest son snorted. "Probably someone lost. Doesn't matter." The mother didn't answer. She kept staring at the closed door, her knuckles white around the photo frame, as though she already knew this wasn't the last time she'd see that man. The door had barely clicked shut, but the echo of that stranger's presence lingered in the room. A shadow of unease passed over the family, though no one wanted to admit it. The eldest daughter set her cup down with a sharp tap, shaking her head. "Ridiculous! Whoever that was, he didn't even belong here." Her words were crisp, dismissive, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity she couldn't hide. The eldest son muttered under his breath, pacing near the mantel. "If Dad had unfinished business, we would have known. People don't just show up at funerals unless they're after something." The younger brother shifted in his chair, his voice low but uneasy. Still, why did he look straight at Mum? All eyes turned to her then. The mother sat in her husband's chair, her hands gripping the photograph so tightly the glass pressed against her palms. She didn't answer their unspoken question. She simply shook her head, her lips moving with words meant only for herself. "Don't let them see," she whispered faintly, her gaze fixed on the picture. "Not yet." No one caught the words, but her trembling was obvious. Just as the tension threatened to unravel into another round of whispers and accusations, the sound of the front door opening again cut through the silence. This time it wasn't hesitant, it was deliberate. A tall man in a grey suit stepped inside, carrying a worn leather briefcase. His hair was peppered with grey, his glasses slipping slightly down the bridge of his nose. He moved with a calm, practiced authority, the kind that made the restless family straighten in their seats. The eldest son let out a breath, his tone impatient. "Finally, let's just get this over with." The family lawyer gave a polite nod but didn't respond. He shut the door carefully behind him, set his gloves on the table, and unlatched his briefcase. The metallic snap of the locks echoed across the room, sharper than it should have been. The mother looked up for the first time since morning, her weary eyes meeting his. She had known this man for decades. He had been at their wedding, at their children's birthdays, at the hospital visits when her husband's illness worsened. If anyone carried the weight of her husband's secrets, it was him. He glanced back at her, his expression heavy, before speaking to the room. Your father left clear instructions. Every word I'm about to read is his, and his alone. There will be no interruptions, no negotiations. This was his final wish. The eldest daughter smirked faintly, folding her arms. We'll see about that. The lawyer pulled a thick envelope from the briefcase, the paper edges worn soft from being handled many times. He laid it gently on the oak table, his hand resting on it for just a moment too long. The mother's breath caught. Her grip on the photograph loosened, and for the first time her voice broke through the silence of the room. Be careful, she whispered, almost pleading. They don't know what he left inside. The lawyer's eyes flicked to her, then back to the family. Then it's time they found out. The lawyer slid the envelope closer, his fingers pressing along the edge before carefully breaking the seal. The sound of paper tearing seemed louder than it should have been, pulling every eye in the room toward him. He unfolded the first page and cleared his throat. His voice was calm, practiced, the voice of a man used to delivering hard truths. Your father's will begins with these instructions. The eldest son leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He didn't bother hiding his confidence. To my eldest son, the lawyer continued, I leave control of the company. A flicker of satisfaction flashed across the son's face. He shot a glance toward his siblings as if victory had already been secured. To my eldest daughter, the lawyer read, I leave the lake house, where I know she found joy in summers by the water. The daughter smirked, tapping her fingernails against her coffee cup. At least he got something right, she muttered. One by one, the lawyer went down the list. Properties, accounts, heirlooms. The cousin in the corner whispered a running tally to her mother, who shushed her quickly. The youngest son shifted in his seat, fidgeting, his eyes darting from the lawyer to the floor. But then the lawyer paused. His finger pressed to the paper, lingering on a line that seemed to weigh heavier than the rest. His jaw tightened slightly, and for the first time, his voice faltered. The eldest daughter raised an eyebrow. What? Out of houses already? The eldest son leaned forward, irritated. Come on, just spit it out. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his eyes flicking briefly to the mother. She hadn't moved, but her grip on the photograph tightened until her knuckles turned white. Her lips parted just enough to whisper something no one caught, a soft, broken plea. The lawyer took a breath. There is another beneficiary. The words cut through the room like glass. The cousins stopped whispering. The youngest son froze mid-fidget. Even the eldest daughter's smirk slipped. The lawyer read carefully, each syllable deliberate. To Michael Harris, I leave a portion of my estate. The name dropped into the room like a stone into water, silent for a second, then ripples of disbelief spreading fast. The eldest son shot to his feet, his chair scraping hard against the floor. Who the hell is Michael Harris? The eldest daughter frowned, leaning forward. Is this some charity case? A gardener? A driver? Who? The youngest son shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. I've heard that name before. All the while the mother stared down at the photo in her lap, tears gathering in her eyes. She pressed her lips to the frame as if seeking strength from the man frozen in it. The lawyer raised his hand, his voice firmer now. There's more you need to hear, because your father made sure this name wouldn't be forgotten. The name still lingered in the air. Michael Harris. No one recognized it, but that didn't matter. The sound of it alone had shattered the room. The eldest son was the first to explode. He shoved his chair back with such force it nearly tipped over, his voice thundering. This is a mistake. Some paperwork mix-up. My father would never hand over part of his estate to a stranger. His sister leaned forward, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Oh, please. If it's in the will, it's no mistake. Maybe Dad had a side we never knew. Looks like you weren't the golden child after all. Her words landed like a slap, and the eldest son's face turned crimson. Shut your mouth! The cousin in the corner whispered, Who is he? Do you think he worked for Dad? Her mother hushed her quickly, but the curiosity in her voice mirrored what everyone else was secretly thinking. The youngest son sat stiff in his chair, his fingers twisting the fabric of his pants. I've heard that name before, he said softly, almost to himself, but no one paid him attention. All eyes turned instead to the mother. She sat frozen in her chair, her hands shaking as she clutched the photo of her husband tighter, pressing it against her chest like a shield. Her lips moved, and this time the family caught it, a faint, broken whisper. Not like this." The eldest son's head snapped toward her. His voice was sharp, accusing. "You knew, didn't you? You knew who this is." The mother flinched, her tears spilling over as she shook her head quickly. "No, please don't." But the damage was done. Suspicion swelled in the room, pressing against the walls like a storm about to break. The lawyer raised his voice above the chaos, his calm composure cracking just enough to command attention. "Enough. Your father left more than names. He left explanations. You will hear them." He reached for the folder again, his hand trembling slightly as he pulled out a smaller sealed envelope. The handwriting across it was faint but still clear. "For my family." The lawyer held it up so all could see. His voice dropped, steady but heavy. He wrote this letter for moments exactly like this, when truth would tear this room apart. The family went silent. Even the eldest son, fists clenched and chest heaving, sank back into his chair, his eyes locked on the envelope. The mother's sobs filled the quiet, her body rocking gently, as if bracing for the words she had dreaded for years. The lawyer broke the seal with care. The paper crackled as he unfolded it, and for a brief second the room held its breath. The lawyer unfolded the letter, the paper trembling just slightly in his hands. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was firm, recognisably the father's. His voice carried across the room, steady but heavy. "To my family," he began, "if these words are being read, then I am no longer with you. I owe you honesty I did not give in life. For that I am sorry. There are truths I hid, thinking silence would protect you, but silence only deepens the wound." The eldest daughter scoffed, leaning back in her chair. "Figures. He always thought he knew best." She tapped her nails against the armrest, though her eyes never left the paper. The eldest son sat rigid, arms crossed so tightly it looked like he was holding himself together. His jaw clenched, his knee bouncing up and down against the hardwood floor. The younger brother's gaze dropped to his hands, which twisted restlessly in his lap. The cousin exchanged a nervous glance with her mother, her phone forgotten on the table. The mother, however, couldn't look away. She leaned forward in her chair, her trembling hands clutching the photo of her husband. Her lips moved, whispering words only she could hear. "Why now? Why like this?" The lawyer read on. "Michael Harris is not a stranger. He is connected to me in a way I can no longer deny. He did not ask for this. He did not ask to be born into my mistakes. But he is innocent of them. He is mine." The words cracked something open in the room. The eldest son slammed his hand against the armrest, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "Lies! He wouldn't write this. He wouldn't—" His voice broke, the anger collapsing into disbelief. The eldest daughter's smirk faltered, her mask slipping. For once she had no quick retort. The younger brother lifted his head slowly, his face pale. "So it's true," he whispered, barely audible. The mother covered her mouth with her hand, her tears spilling. She shook her head, rocking gently, as if trying to hold herself steady against the truth unravelling in front of them. The lawyer lowered the page, his eyes sweeping the room. "Your father left more. He knew this would divide you. He prepared for it." He reached back into the briefcase and pulled out another envelope, heavier, sealed with care. He placed it on the table with deliberate calm. "This," he said, his voice firm, "contains proof stronger than words. He left it for the moment you refused to believe him." The chandelier's light caught on the envelope, the wax seal glinting faintly. The family stared at it as though it were a live fuse ready to blow apart what little certainty they had left. The mother's sobs quieted, but her hands gripped the photograph tighter than ever. She closed her eyes and whispered, barely above breath, "God help us." The lawyer broke the wax seal with careful hands, sliding out the folded letter inside. His eyes scanned the words once before he began. The air in the room seemed to hold still, the faint tick of the clock louder than every breath. His voice was steady but heavy. "Michael Harris is not a stranger to me. He is my son." The words landed like a hammer. The eldest son shot up from his chair, his voice cracking with fury. No, that's not true. He would have told us. We would have known." His hands clenched into fists, his face red, as though shouting might undo the sentence he'd just heard. The eldest daughter's jaw dropped, her sarcasm gone for once. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, shaking her head, her nails drumming nervously against the armrest. The younger brother pressed both palms against his knees, his body stiff. "A brother? We have a brother?" His words were whispered, almost childlike, carrying more fear than curiosity. The mother sank deeper into her chair, her face buried in the photograph she clutched. Her shoulders trembled, her tears soaking into the frame. She didn't speak, but the way her body shook was answer enough. She had always known, at least part of it. The lawyer kept reading. "I provided for Michael quietly. You never saw the checks, the accounts, the ways I tried to make up for my absence. But money cannot replace a name. Money cannot replace truth. And I will not leave this world denying him what is his." The eldest son let out a bitter laugh, harsh and broken. "So what? Some man walks in and suddenly he's one of us? He gets everything we worked for?" The lawyer looked up sharply. "Your father's choices were not mistakes on paper. They were deliberate. He wrote these words with clarity, with intent. You may not like them, but you cannot erase them." The room simmered with anger and disbelief. The chandelier above flickered slightly, as if even the lights were uneasy. The eldest daughter leaned forward, her voice sharp but trembling. "And what if we refuse? What if we never accept this Michael?" The lawyer set the letter down and reached back into the briefcase. His hand rested on another envelope, this one heavier, thicker. His eyes swept the room before settling on hers. "Then," he said firmly, "I open this, and inside is the kind of proof no one in this family will be able to deny." The family stared at it, their anger shifting into dread. The eldest son swallowed hard, his bravado cracking. The younger brother looked away, pressing his forehead against the window pane. The mother closed her eyes, whispering to the photo in her hands. "Why did you make me carry this secret alone?" The lawyer tapped the envelope gently against the table, his expression grave. "The decision is yours. Do you accept his words, or do I show you the truth he left behind?" The lawyer's hand stayed on the thick envelope, but no one in the room seemed ready to let him open it. The silence broke in jagged pieces. The eldest son erupted first, his voice booming. "This is garbage. He was our father. He didn't hide children. He didn't live double lives. This is some trick." He jabbed a finger at the lawyer, his other hand slamming the chair back into place. The eldest daughter rose too, her tone biting. "Wake up. You heard the letter. He admitted it himself. You just don't want to face it." She crossed her arms, her nails digging into her skin, the rhythm of her foot tapping against the hardwood betraying her nerves. The cousin whispered from the corner, "Maybe Dad did send money. Remember the checks that never made sense?" Her mother hushed her quickly, but the seed of suspicion was planted. The younger brother stood by the window, his breath fogging the cold glass. "All this time," he muttered, "we thought we knew everything about him." He shook his head, his voice cracking. "We didn't know a thing." All eyes turned to the mother. She sat hunched in her chair, her face pale, the photograph still clutched to her chest. Her lips parted, and this time her words were loud enough to be heard. "I begged him not to do this, not like this." The eldest son froze, his voice sharp, accusing. "So you knew?" The mother's tears spilled faster, her head shaking violently. "I knew enough," she whispered, the weight of it breaking something fragile in the room. Her confession sent shockwaves through the family. The eldest daughter's hand flew to her mouth. The cousin sat upright, wide-eyed. Even the younger brother turned from the window, staring at her in disbelief. The shouting started again, louder, harsher. The eldest son pacing, spitting accusations. The eldest daughter firing back with scorn. The younger brother pleading for them to stop. The lawyer raising his voice, his patience thinning. And then, the creak of the front door silenced them all. Every head turned. Slow, steady footsteps crossed the threshold. Standing there in the doorway was the same man from the porch that morning. His worn jacket hung heavy on his shoulders, his calloused hands stiff at his sides. He didn't shrink under their stares. His eyes swept the room, landing briefly on the mother, before steadying on the lawyer. The eldest son's voice was low, dangerous. "Who the hell are you?" The man straightened his posture. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "My name is Michael Harris." For a moment, no one spoke. The name they had been dreading now belonged to the man standing in their doorway. The eldest son's face twisted with rage. He jabbed a finger across the room. "Get out, you don't belong here. This is our house, our family, not yours." His words shook with fury, but underneath was something closer to fear. Michael didn't flinch. He kept his voice calm, though the weight behind it was clear. I didn't come to take anything from you. I came because he asked me to. The eldest daughter laughed sharply, though the sound rang hollow. How convenient. Dad's gone, and suddenly you show up with your sad story. What's next? You claim the company, the lake house, the bank accounts. Michael's eyes flicked to her, then back to the floor for a moment, steadying himself. When he looked up again, his voice was steady. I don't want your company. I don't want your houses. I never asked for any of this, but I am his son. The youngest brother pressed his palms against the windowsill, his voice trembling. You can't just say that. Words don't make it true. Michael's gaze turned to him, softer now. I never asked for it to be true, but it is. The mother lifted her head for the first time, her eyes red and swollen. She stared at Michael as though she were looking at a ghost. Her lips parted, but no sound came, just a broken breath, a trembling of her hands against the photo frame in her lap. The eldest son took a step forward, his fists clenched. Say it again. Michael stood taller, his shoulders squared, though his voice remained quiet. I am his son. Before the eldest son could lunge closer, the lawyer's voice boomed, firmer than before. Enough! The sharp crack of his palm against the table startled everyone. The chandelier above rattled faintly with the vibration. The lawyer reached for the thick envelope resting beside him. He held it up so all could see, his eyes hard behind his glasses. Your father knew this day would come. He knew words might not be enough. That's why he left proof no one can deny. The eldest daughter narrowed her eyes, folding her arms tight. Proof? What kind of proof? The lawyer set the envelope down on the table, his hand pressing against it firmly. What's inside here will answer every question, but once I open it, there will be no going back. The room fell silent. The clock on the wall ticked louder, the sound of the wind rattled faintly at the windows. Michael stood still by the doorway, his jaw tight, his breath shallow. He didn't reach for the envelope, he didn't need to. The mother let out a faint sob, whispering to the photograph clutched in her arms, Why did you leave this for me to face? The lawyer's hand stayed on the envelope, his voice dropping low. If you truly want the truth, it's right here. The choice is yours. The envelope sat in the centre of the table, its edges worn from being handled too many times. No one dared touch it. The eldest son's chest rose and fell in quick bursts, his fists clenched at his sides. The eldest daughter's nails tapped an uneven rhythm against her armrest. Even the younger brother, usually quiet, stood frozen near the window, staring at the envelope as though it might burst into flames. The lawyer broke the silence. Your father asked me to use this only if his words weren't enough. I believe we've reached that moment. He slid a letter opener across the seal and tore it carefully. The ripping sound was sharp, raw, cutting through the room like a blade. He pulled out a thin folder and opened it. His eyes skimmed the page before he spoke. These are certified DNA results, conducted less than a year ago. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. They confirm, with 99.9% certainty, that Michael Harris is the biological son of your father. The words hit like a hammer. The eldest son staggered back a step, shaking his head violently. No, this can't be. He wouldn't do this to us. His voice cracked, and for the first time, the anger in his eyes gave way to fear. The eldest daughter's smirk was gone. She sat stiff, her mouth open but no words coming, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair until her knuckles whitened. The younger brother leaned forward against the window frame, his forehead pressed to the glass. His voice was barely audible. So it's true, we have a brother. True. The cousin gasped softly, covering her mouth, her wide eyes flicking from the lawyer to Michael. The mother broke down completely, her sobs echoing off the wooden walls. She rocked back and forth, the photograph of her husband pressed to her chest. You fool, she whispered through her tears. You left me to carry this alone. Michael didn't move. He stood near the doorway, shoulders squared, his face pale but calm. His eyes glistened, but he blinked back the tears, refusing to let them fall here. He didn't look proud or victorious. He looked like a man standing in the wreckage of a truth he never asked for. The lawyer set the folder down gently on the table. There can be no more denial. This is the truth your father wanted you to face. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. No one spoke. The anger had drained out of the room, leaving only shock, betrayal and grief hanging heavy in the air. The eldest daughter finally broke the silence, her voice hoarse. "So what now? He just walks in and becomes one of us? Just like that?" Michael lifted his eyes, meeting hers. His voice was steady, but the ache in it was undeniable. "I never asked to be one of you. I never wanted your money. I just needed to know if I mattered to him. That's all." The lawyer cleared his throat softly, sliding a final folded page from the envelope. His expression was somber. "There is one more message, his last words to all of you." The family stiffened, their eyes drawn to the page in his hand. The mother closed her eyes, bracing herself. The lawyer unfolded it slowly. The lawyer unfolded the last page slowly, as though the paper itself might shatter under the weight of the words. His voice softened, carrying a tone different from before. Not the firmness of a lawyer, but the tenderness of a man reading a friend's goodbye. "To my family," he began. "If you're hearing this, it means I never found the courage to say these words in person. For that, I am deeply sorry. I lived my life building walls where I should have built bridges. I told myself I was protecting you from pain. In truth, I was protecting myself from facing it." The eldest son stared at the floor, his fists unclenched now, his shoulders sagging as though the fight had drained out of him. The lawyer read on. "Michael did not ask for this life, or for me. He was born of my mistakes, but he should not pay for them. He deserves acknowledgement, not money, not titles, just a place where he is no longer hidden. If you deny him, you deny me." The eldest daughter pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes wet despite her effort to hold steady. The mother closed her eyes, her tears falling silently now. She rocked gently in her chair, whispering to the photo in her lap. "You should have told them yourself. You should have told them yourself." The lawyer's voice softened further. "What I leave you today is not just property or wealth. Those things can be divided, sold, spent, forgotten. What I beg you to hold on to is each other. Do not let my silence destroy what remains of this family. If you do, then everything I worked for, every sacrifice I made, will mean nothing." The words fell into silence. The lawyer folded the page with trembling hands and set it on the table. No one spoke. The only sound was the slow, uneven breathing of people who had just heard a truth they could never unhear. Michael finally stepped forward from the doorway. His voice was quiet, but every word carried. "I don't want your houses. I don't want your company. I don't want a penny of your money." He paused, his eyes glistening as he looked at the photograph in the mother's hands. "I just needed to know that I wasn't invisible, that he thought of me, even once." The eldest son didn't reply. The eldest daughter looked away, blinking hard. The younger brother lowered his head, ashamed. The mother lifted her gaze slowly, meeting Michael's eyes. Through the wreckage of her grief, there was something fragile there, recognition, maybe even acceptance. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "He did, more than you know." Michael gave a small nod, then turned toward the door. His steps were steady, quiet. He opened it and the cold air swept in, rattling the chandelier overhead. Before he stepped outside, he looked back once more, not at the fortune, not at the room, but at the photograph in his mother's hands. And then he was gone. The family remained in silence, surrounded by wealth that suddenly felt smaller than the truth they had been forced to face. In the end, what remained wasn't the company, the houses, or the money. It was the truth. A truth that tore open wounds, but also revealed what had been hidden too long. Sometimes, what we fear to confess can weigh heavier than the mistake itself. And when silence breaks, it doesn't just expose the past, it reshapes the future of everyone left behind. So here's the question. If today were your last chance to speak, would the people you love know the truth you've been holding back? Thank you for staying with this story. We'll meet again in the next one, right here on Rain Inside.